I never believed in ghosts. Not the sheet-draped kind, anyway. The ones I feared, the ones that haunted my sleepless nights, were the ghosts of doubt, suspicion, and betrayal. They crept into my marriage years before I ever saw them, invisible but suffocating, until one day they wore my wife's perfume and spoke in her voice. It began on a night like any other, only colder. October rain tapped at the kitchen windows as I sat in the half-light, scrolling through work emails and listening to Lily hum in the next room. Our life was ordinary, comfortable, married for 8 years, a mortgage, 2 cats, game nights with friends. And yet, lately, her laughter came a little too quickly, and her eyes darted away from mine, as if protecting some fragile secret. I told myself I was imagining things. After all, what could be wrong? We had built this life together, brick by brick. But the first crack appeared not in our marriage, but in her calendar. It happened on a Tuesday, when my coworker Mark stopped by my desk, phone in hand, face pale. "Hey, I think you should see this," he muttered, showing me an email with my wife's name in the subject line. "I was trying to forward you the meeting invites for next week, but I must have attached the wrong calendar. Sorry, man." There, in plain text, were a series of romantic calendar invites. Dinners, hotel reservations, reminders labeled "just one perfect night with him." The recipient, a name I didn't recognize. My hands went numb. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over, hoping the letters would rearrange themselves into something less damning. I confronted Lily that night, heart pounding, voice trembling. She didn't deny it. Instead, she met my eyes, finally, and spoke 3 words that would rewire my life. Just one night. She told me it was a fantasy, a harmless wish, a dream she'd held since before we met. She claimed it was never meant to become real. But reality, once breached, is never the same. I demanded details, desperate for some anchor. She said she'd met him at a conference. Her dream man, she called him, her voice breaking. She swore it was over, that it had only happened once. But trust, once broken, is not easily mended. It festers, grows wild, and seeps into everything. The next days passed in a blur. I went through the motions, work, home, dinner, bed, but my mind replayed every moment of our marriage, searching for missed signs. I found myself noticing everything. Her phone left face down, the extra care she took with her appearance, the way she flinched when I touched her shoulder. I became a detective in my own home, sifting through her words for lies, her laughter for guilt. Still, she insisted it was nothing. It was just one night, James. I needed to know if the fantasy was better than the reality. It wasn't. I'm sorry. She wept in my arms, her tears soaking my shirt, but I couldn't hold her the same way anymore. I tried to forgive her. I tried to be the bigger man. I even agreed to couples therapy, hoping a professional could stitch us back together. But the sessions only dredged up old wounds. Her loneliness, my long hours at work, the ways we drifted apart without noticing. Each revelation felt like another betrayal, another secret unearthed. I started sleeping on the couch, claiming I didn't want to disturb her, but the truth was, I couldn't stand the quiet intimacy of our bedroom. I missed her, but I missed the woman I thought she was. One night, as I lay staring at the ceiling, I heard her crying in the bathroom. The sound was raw, desperate. I stood outside the door, my hand raised to knock, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. Instead, I listened, the weight of her pain pressing against the barrier between us. Then, everything changed again. A week later, Mark called me into his office, his eyes shifting nervously. "Look, man, I have to tell you something. I didn't just forward those invites by accident. I saw them in the shared drive. I thought you should know." I felt my stomach drop. The shared drive? That meant the invites weren't just between her and her dream man. They'd been visible to several people at the company. Panic and shame flooded me. Had everyone known before I did? Was I the last to see the truth? I rushed home, desperate for answers, but Lily wasn't there. Her car was gone. I checked her calendar, an old habit by now, and saw a new event, closure dinner. I drove to the restaurant listed, my mind racing. Was she seeing him again? Was this really about closure or something more? I parked across the street, heart hammering, and watched through the rain-spattered window as she sat alone, fiddling with her phone. Minutes later, a man joined her, tall, dark-haired, confident. The way she looked at him made my chest ache. I couldn't bring myself to go inside. Instead, I waited, watching as they talked, her hands fluttering nervously. At one point, she reached across the table, touching his hand. He shook his head, gently pulling away. She looked devastated, wiping her eyes with a napkin. Finally, she stood, hugged him tightly, and left. I drove home in silence. When she arrived an hour later, she found me in the kitchen, staring at the calendar on my phone. "It's over," she whispered. "I told him I couldn't see him again. I chose you." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to erase the past, to return to the days when love was simple. But the ghosts lingered, whispering doubts. How could I trust her? How could I trust myself? Days turned into weeks. We tried to rebuild, to create new routines. We cooked together, went for long walks, watched old movies. Sometimes it felt almost normal. Other times, the silence between us was suffocating. One night, as we lay in bed, she turned to me, her eyes shining with tears. "I'm sorry, James. I wish I could undo it. I wish I could be the woman you thought I was." I reached for her hand, feeling the roughness of her skin, the pulse beneath. "We're both changed," I said. "We can't go back, but maybe we can go forward." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was hope. And sometimes that's all you need. If you found this story moving, please like, comment, and subscribe for more. She squeezed my hand in the dark, and for the first time in months, I felt something real between us. Not the old, familiar comfort, but something raw and uncertain, a fragile bridge over the chasm that had opened beneath our feet. I drifted into sleep, half expecting to wake up to another normal morning, but the world wasn't done with me. A week later, I was at work, scrolling through my inbox, when a new calendar invite popped up. It was from Mark, the quiet guy from the design team, usually the last person to send meeting requests. The subject read simply, "Lunch, Plaza Cafe." The time was noon, and the guest list showed two names, Mark and Sarah. My Sarah. My stomach dropped. It wasn't so much the invite, it was the timing. Today, now. I checked my phone. No message from Sarah. No clue she was meeting anyone for lunch, let alone one of my colleagues. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking over the accept button, my finger hovering, unsure. Could this be a mistake? A harmless work thing? Or was I staring at the first crack in our fragile new piece? I closed the invite, tried to focus on my work, but every minute dragged. I kept glancing at the clock, watching the numbers crawl toward noon. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. Maybe I was losing my grip. I needed to know. At 11:45, I told my boss I was taking an early lunch and headed for the cafe, my heart pounding. I found a table in the corner, ordered a coffee, and waited. The cafe buzzed with the lunch crowd, laughter and clinking dishes filling the air, but I barely heard any of it. All I could think about was Sarah's face, her eyes, her smile, the way she looked at me now, different from before. Did she still look at him that way? At 12:05, Mark walked in alone. He glanced around, checked his phone, then sat at a table by the window. He looked nervous, fidgeting with his napkin, checking the door every few seconds. My chest tightened. If he was expecting her, she was late, or maybe she wasn't coming at all. I watched him for 10 minutes, sipping my coffee, my mind spinning. Was this a setup, a mistake, or was I about to see something I couldn't unsee? I pulled out my phone, hesitated, then sent Sarah a text. "Hey, just checking in. What are you up to?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then nothing. I waited,
my pulse loud in my ears. Finally, my phone buzzed. "Just running errands. Miss you. How's your day?" I stared at her message, trying to read between the lines. She was lying. Or was she? Maybe she really was just running errands. Maybe I was imagining things, seeing betrayal everywhere. But the calendar invite was real. Mark was here, waiting. And my gut said something was off. I typed, then deleted, then typed again. "Just working. Love you." I hit send, feeling like a traitor myself. Was I testing her, spying, or just trying to protect the tiny flame of hope we'd kindled? Mark's phone rang. He answered, his face tightening. He spoke quietly, nodded a few times, then hung up. He glanced at his watch, sighed, and stood. He left some cash on the table and walked out, shoulders slumped. I sat there, stunned. What just happened? Had Sarah canceled? Or had this whole thing been a mistake from the start? I needed to know, but I also needed to trust. If we had any chance, I had to give her that. I finished my coffee, paid, and walked back to the office, my thoughts a jumble. When I got to my desk, I opened my calendar again. The invite was gone, deleted, like it had never existed. I checked my sent folder, my trash, nothing. Had I imagined it? Was I losing it? That night, Sarah came home late. She looked exhausted, her hair pulled back, her eyes shadowed. She kissed me on the cheek, her lips cool and dry. "Long day," she said, dropping her bag on the couch. "You okay?" I wanted to ask about the cafe, about Mark, but the words stuck in my throat. If I brought it up, would it undo everything? Would it prove I didn't trust her, that I was watching her every move? Or would it be the honest thing, the only way forward? I nodded. "Yeah, just tired. You?" She sighed, sat beside me. "It's been a lot. I keep thinking about us, about how much I hurt you. I don't know if I can ever make it right." I reached for her hand, felt her fingers tremble. "We're both trying," I said. "That's all we can do." She looked at me, her eyes searching. "Do you still love me?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes, but it's different now, and that's okay. Maybe it's better in a way, more real." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I want to be better for you, for us. I just don't know if I can." I pulled her close, felt her head rest on my shoulder. "We'll figure it out," I whispered, "one day at a time." We sat like that for a long time, the silence between us full of everything we couldn't say. The past, the pain, the hope. The calendar invite, the cafe, the unanswered questions. Maybe someday I'd ask. Maybe someday she'd tell. But for now, we just held on. The next morning, I woke up to find Sarah already gone, a note on the kitchen counter. "Had to run in early. Love you. See you tonight." I stared at the words, wondering if they were true, if anything was. At work, I saw Mark at the coffee machine. He looked up, nodded, then looked away quickly. I wanted to ask him about yesterday, about the invite, but the words died on my lips. What would I say? What would it change? Instead, I poured my coffee, nodded back, and walked to my desk. I opened my inbox, scanned for anything unusual, but everything looked normal. Maybe it had been a glitch. Maybe I was seeing ghosts. But that afternoon, as I was packing up, Mark stopped by my desk. He looked nervous, shifting from foot to foot. "Hey, can I talk to you for a sec?" My heart skipped. "Sure, what's up?" He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Look, I think I messed up. I sent you a calendar invite by mistake yesterday. It was supposed to be private. I'm really sorry if it caused any confusion." I stared at him, my mind racing. "What do you mean, private?" He swallowed. "It was for lunch with someone, not work-related. I must have added you by accident when I was setting it up. I deleted it as soon as I realized, but I wanted to apologize. I didn't mean to drag you into anything." I nodded slowly, my chest tight. "No problem. Accidents happen." He looked relieved. "Thanks.
I just didn't want any weirdness between us. He walked away, and I sat there, trying to process. So it had been a mistake. A simple, stupid mistake. Nothing more. I should have felt relieved, but instead, I felt hollow. Was this the truth, or was he covering for something? For her? I drove home in a daze, the city lights blurring past. When I got there, Sarah was cooking dinner, the kitchen filled with the smell of garlic and onions. She smiled when she saw me, but her eyes were guarded. "Hey, how was your day?" I kissed her cheek, breathed her in. "Strange. You?" She stirred the pot, her back to me. "Okay, just busy. You hungry?" I sat at the table, watched her move around the kitchen. She looked different tonight, lighter maybe, or just better at hiding the weight. I wanted to tell her about Mark, about the invite, about how close I'd come to accusing her again, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I said, "You look beautiful tonight." She glanced at me, surprised, then smiled, really smiled for the first time in weeks. "Thanks, you're not so bad yourself." We ate in silence, the space between us filled with all the things we couldn't say. The past, the pain, the hope, the lies, the mistakes, the love that somehow, against all odds, still flickered between us. Later, as we lay in bed, Sarah turned to me. "Do you ever wonder if we'll be okay?" I looked at her, the moonlight painting her face in silver. "I don't know, but I want to find out." She nodded, her eyes shining. "Me too." And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe it could be true. Not because the past was erased, but because the future was still unfinished, uncarved. We'd both made mistakes. Hers the kind that shattered, mine the kind that let the cracks grow wide and silent. The only way out was through, so we tried, every day, to keep moving. The next morning, the sunlight crawled across our bedroom, warm and golden, the kind of light that makes everything look softer. Sarah was already up, her side of the bed cold. I found her in the living room, curled up with her knees to her chest, staring out at the street below. She heard me and patted the couch beside her. Wordlessly, I sat down, close but not touching. She cleared her throat. "I think we should talk to someone, a therapist maybe. I don't know how to do this alone." There was relief in her voice, but also fear. I nodded. "I think that's a good idea." It felt like an admission of defeat, but I knew it wasn't. It was the first real step we'd taken together in weeks, maybe months. That afternoon, I called around, found a couples counselor with a cancellation. We got an appointment for Thursday. In the days leading up to it, our routines shifted. We were polite, almost overly so. The old casual touches, her hand on my shoulder as I made coffee, my arm around her waist watching TV, were gone. Everything was careful, calibrated. On Thursday, we sat together in the beige waiting room, knees bouncing in nervous rhythm. The therapist, a woman in her 50s with gentle eyes, ushered us in. We sat side by side on the couch, not quite touching. She asked us to tell our story, in our own words. Sarah started, and I watched her hands twist in her lap. "I love James. I made a terrible mistake. I never thought I'd be that person, but I was. I wish I could take it back, but I can't. I'm scared I've ruined us forever." I listened, not interrupting, not correcting. My turn came, and my voice shook. I keep replaying everything, what I missed, what I did wrong, what she did. I want to forgive. I don't know how to stop feeling like this is a nightmare I can't wake up from. The therapist nodded slowly. "You're both here. That matters. The first step is atonement, acknowledging the pain, the betrayal, and letting the anger come out in the open. Then, and only then, can you begin to rebuild trust." I'd read about it, the Gottman method, atone, attune, attach. But living it was different than reading about it. The next session, the therapist told me to say what I needed to say, no matter how ugly. So I did. I told Sarah how I'd felt that night, the first time I saw the calendar invite. The way the world tilted, the emptiness that opened beneath my feet. She took it all, tears streaming down her face, never looking away. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'll say it 1,000 times if you need me to." It wasn't a magic fix, but it was something. Each week we went back. Some sessions were screaming matches, others were sobs and silence. The therapist pushed us to talk about the hard things, the loneliness, the resentment, the little betrayals that had piled up long before her affair. Sarah admitted to feeling invisible, like she'd faded into the background of my life. I realized I'd been distant, buried in work, in my own head, assuming we were fine because nothing was on fire. But sometimes love burns quietly, unnoticed, until only ashes remain. One night, after a particularly brutal session, we sat in the car, neither of us starting the engine. Sarah spoke first. "Do you really want to stay? You could leave, James. No one would blame you." I stared at my hands. I think about it, leaving. But then I think about not seeing you every day, not hearing you laugh, not waking up next to you. And I can't do it. I want us, even if it's hard. She reached for my hand, tentative, and I let her take it. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was strong. "Then let's try, for real. No more secrets." We made new rules, radical honesty, even when it hurt. No more keeping score. We would check in with each other, really talk, even when it was awkward or scary. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, something began to change. Trust, I learned, wasn't a single thing you built once and then kept polished on a shelf. It was 1,000 small decisions every day. Choosing to believe her when she said she was working late. Choosing to tell her when I felt angry or afraid, instead of letting it fester. Choosing over and over to stay. Sarah did the work too. She met every question with patience, never defensive. She let me see her phone, her email, anything I wanted. She stopped going out for drinks with coworkers, started texting me when she'd be late. It was awkward at first, but gradually it felt less like policing and more like caring. But healing wasn't linear. There were setbacks, nights when I woke from a nightmare, convinced she was gone, heart pounding. Days when something small would trigger a memory, a song, a cologne, a laugh that sounded too familiar. Sometimes I lashed out, sometimes I withdrew. One evening, I came home to find her sitting on the porch, knees drawn up, face wet with tears. She looked at me, her voice trembling. "I got an email from him. I didn't respond. I wanted to tell you right away." My chest tightened, but I nodded. "Thank you for telling me." She handed me her phone, letting me read the message. It was short, polite. He wanted closure, he said, wanted her to know he wished her well. I read it twice, searching for hidden meanings, but there were none. "I blocked him," she said quietly, "for good. I'm done." I believed her, not because I wanted to, but because she was showing me her fear, her honesty. It was a risk for both of us. But trust is a risk by definition. In therapy, we started working on the next phase, attunement, understanding each other's inner worlds. We practiced listening, not just waiting to speak, but really hearing. Sarah told me about her dreams, her regrets, her fears of being unlovable. I told her about my shame, my anger, my longing for things to go back to the way they were. "They can't," the therapist said gently, "but you can build something new. Sometimes that's even stronger." We started dating again, not just routines and chores, but real dates, dinners out, walks by the river, lazy mornings in bed talking about nothing and everything. At first, it felt forced, like actors playing a married couple. But then, little by little, the laughter returned, the inside jokes, the silly nicknames, the warmth. One Saturday, we drove out to the coast, just the two of us. We walked the beach, cold wind whipping our faces, sand squeaking beneath our shoes. Sarah stopped, turned to me, her hair tangled by the breeze. "Do you still love me?" she asked, so quietly I almost missed it. I took her face in my hands, traced the lines I knew so well. "Yes, I do. I don't know if I'll ever trust you the way I did before, but I love you." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "That's enough, for now." We spent the night in a cheap motel, the kind with peeling wallpaper and a rattling heater. We made love slowly, tenderly, neither of us rushing. Afterward, we lay tangled together, her head on my chest, listening to the rain tap the window. "I'm scared," she whispered, "that I'll never forgive myself, that I'll lose you anyway." I stroked her hair. "We're both scared, but we're here." Her breathing slowed, and soon she was asleep. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight and wonder of it all. The pain, the love, the impossible hope. Back home, we kept doing the work. Some days were better than others. Sometimes I thought about leaving. Sometimes she did too. But we stayed, and slowly the wound closed. One night, months later, I found Sarah in the kitchen, baking, her therapy. Flour dusted her nose, her hair a wild mess. She looked up, grinning. "Chocolate chip," she announced, "your favorite." I smiled, feeling something warm and old and new all at once. I wrapped my arms around her from behind, pressed my face to her neck. "I miss this," I murmured. She leaned back into me. "Me too." We ate cookies on the couch, milk mustaches and laughter echoing in the dark. There were still hard days, triggers, setbacks, but there were also days when I forgot, even for a few hours, that anything had ever been broken. We found new ways to be honest, to check in with each other. Sometimes we journaled, writing letters we might never send, answering questions neither of us knew how to ask out loud. What do you need from me right now? How do you feel when you remember what happened? What scares you most about us now? Sometimes the answers surprised me. Sometimes they hurt. But it was better than silence. We rode through the anger, the grief, the confusion. We rode through the hope. One night, Sarah handed me a letter. Her handwriting, shaky at first, then steadier. "I need you to know why," she'd written. "Not to excuse myself, but to help you understand. I was lonely. I felt invisible. Not because of you, not really, but because of something hollow inside me that I never learned to fill. When Mark flirted with me, it was like someone finally saw the parts I tried to hide. I let myself believe that one night could fix what was broken in me, but it didn't. It made everything worse. I hurt you. I hurt myself. I would take it back if I could." I read her words twice, then folded the letter and put it in my drawer. That night, I held her and cried, because grief is not just for what you lose, but for what you almost lost. Our therapist encouraged us to talk about the affair, not to bury it. "You have to make room in your story for what happened," she said. "You can't move forward with just denial or blame. If you create a new narrative together, you can learn to trust again. It doesn't erase the past, but it gives you a way to make sense of it, to find control and hope for the future." So we kept telling our story, even the ugly parts. We talked about the loneliness, the missed signals, the ways we drifted. We made space for why it happened, so we could make space for something new. Rebuilding trust was messy. Sometimes I'd catch myself checking her phone, searching for evidence of something that wasn't there. Sometimes she'd overcompensate, canceling plans just to be home when I walked through the door, as if proximity could erase suspicion. We had fights that felt like the end. We had dinners that felt like beginnings. I learned that forgiveness wasn't one moment, but 1,000 small choices: to stay, to listen, to believe, to risk. She learned that regret could be a teacher, not just a punishment. We built new rituals: Sunday morning coffee on the porch, date nights at the cheap Italian place down the street, honest conversations, even when they hurt. We wrote new rules for privacy and transparency, not as punishment, but as reassurance. She gave me access to her calendar, her phone, her heart. I learned to use them gently. One afternoon, while cleaning out the closet, I found the old suit I'd worn the night she confessed. The memory hit me so hard I sat down, dizzy. But this time, instead of bitterness, I felt gratitude. Strange, but true. If we hadn't shattered, we might never have rebuilt. Months became a year. The pain faded, never vanished, but shrank into something manageable.
Sometimes I'd catch Sarah watching me, her eyes filled with apology and hope. Sometimes I'd reach for her hand without thinking, and she'd squeeze back, as if to say, "Still here, still trying." We started talking about the future again, vacations, maybe a move. We talked about children, about what kind of parents we'd be. We talked about trust, not as an old debt, but as a living thing. I realized slowly that the affair was not the end of our story. It was a chapter, a painful, necessary one, but not the whole book. We were writing something new together. One evening, as the sun set and the house filled with golden light, Sarah turned to me. "Do you think we made it?" she asked. I thought about all we'd lost and all we'd found. I thought about the nights I'd doubted, the mornings I'd hoped. I thought about the love that had survived, battered but unbroken. "I think we're making it," I said, "day by day." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for choosing me." I squeezed her hand. "Thank you for choosing us." If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, comment, or subscribe for more. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment and hit like. It really helps the channel. And subscribe for more true stories.